Can you really brood your chicks without losing any of them? Yeah, it is possible. Well, in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how you can brood your chicks without losing any of them. So get ready for the video. First of all, brooding is the raising of the chicks from day-old chicks to a point whereby they can stay on their own. That's up to when? That's when they have finally put up their feathers and they can actually provide enough warmth by themselves. So when it comes to brooding, there are very many things that are connected, really. Very many things. First of all is that before you think about brooding, first thing that you should think about is the house where you are going to be brooding your chicks. Make sure that the house is very, very good. Make sure that you disinfect the house, you clean it thoroughly so that there is no any germ which is going to affect our birds. These birds are still fragile, they are very young, they are very weak, so we must do whatever we can to protect them from any kind of illness or disease which is coming to them. That's number one. And then still on that, make sure that the house is warm. You must warm the house before bringing in your birds. And then second is that you must have bedding materials, the litter, you must have wood shavings on the floor. On top of that, make sure that newspapers are on top, because at this point these birds, they know nothing yet in this world. They don't know how to differentiate whether this is a wood shaving or these are feeds. So the moment you actually expose them to the wood shavings like that, the birds are going to eat the wood shavings. And then make sure that you have enough source of heat. You can have charcoal, you can have electricity, but make sure that there is enough source of heat in the house. And then another thing is that the moment you bring your birds to your poultry farm, the first thing that you should do is that never give them feeds at first. Don't do that. The first thing that you should do is that, because we all know that these birds are from somewhere and they have been actually moving from somewhere to your farm. First of all, the birds are stressed. And then second, the birds have actually lost a lot of water from their body. There have actually been a lot of dehydration on the birds. So the first thing that you should do is that when the birds arrive onto your poultry farm, depending on the distance which they have covered, make sure that you first give them water which has glucose and then vitamins in it. The glucose is to actually give them strength. The birds are still weak, the joints are exhausted, so the glucose will actually strengthen the joints and then give them energy to stand. Because there are some birds, when they arrive at the farm, when you look at them you will think that they will die, but they won't, because they are still weak. Even they can't stand, they cannot stand firmly like this. You will only put them down, they will fall. That's because of the joints being weak due to the long distance covered and all those stuffs. So make sure you give them glucose and the vitamins. And then after like an hour or two, that's when you can introduce the feeds to these birds. And then still on top of that, make sure that the feeds are scattered on the newspapers. To actually make easy access of the birds to the feeds, scatter them on the ground, and then don't get too tired of replacing these newspapers. Birds will actually poop, and when they actually poop, that poop alone can actually spoil the newspapers. And when they spoil the newspapers, make sure that you replace them for at least 3 to 4 days, and then you can now leave them like that. That's when they now know that this is feeds, and then this is wood shavings. And then number two is that when you have brought your poultry birds into your poultry farm, this is more especially with the layers and then the broilers, do not give them mixed feeds which is mixed by yourself. I don't know if I'm right there. Yeah, don't mix feeds for your birds. I do advise that you go and then buy the ready-made feeds which are required for the birds at that stage. Most especially, you must use what we call the pellet, because those feeds, they are made 100% with all of the nutrients required for that bird. But the moment you actually try to mix your poultry feeds and then give them to these birds, first of all, the issues connected with poultry feeds are very, very complicated. Very, very complicated, unless you know very much about poultry feeds. So you can actually mix your poultry feeds and then think that maybe the requirements that you have mixed are now good for your birds, and yet maybe you have missed some requirements, or some requirements are over the required one. So at this point, at least for a week, try as much as possible to give them the ready-made feeds. That way they will also grow very, very fast. And then after a week, you can now switch to mixing your poultry feeds and then give them to your birds. And then another one is that make sure that the temperature in the house is right for the birds. We must have, sources of heat in the house, but at some point you must also put the recommended percentage of the heat in the house. I suggest you can get a thermometer and then put in your poultry house. And then second, if you can't get a thermometer, number one, you can see by the behavior of the birds. When the birds are really scattered, like in one place, that one means that the house is too cold. You must add a little bit of heat in the house. And then the moment the birds are scattered very well, that one means that the temperature is okay. And then another thing with the temperature is that too much temperature, guys, in the house can make the birds to drink a lot of water. And the moment they drink a lot of water, because the temperature is hot, there will be no need of the feeds to the birds. So they will be drinking a lot of water and then rehydrating very high. That one means that the feed consumption to these birds will be very, very low. And that is really, really a big problem. So make sure that the temperature is just normal, not too high, not too low. Because if it is too high, like I said, that's a problem. And if it is also too low, also a problem. So make sure that the temperatures are okay, really, really okay for the birds. And yeah, the birds will grow super, super quick and very, very easy without losing any bird in your poultry house. Another thing which is very, very important during brooding is that make sure that you follow the biosecurity measures to the maximum. To the maximum, guys. At this point, these birds are very weak, like I said, very weak. So the moment you actually put your biosecurity measures very weak, you actually allow people to come into your poultry farm anyhow, then a disease can break out into your poultry farm. And if it breaks out, that's a disease. And if a disease catches your birds, these birds are weak, they don't have that immunity to fight the disease, they will all die. So make sure that the biosecurity measures is at the top. Don't allow farm visits at that time. And the person working in that brooder should only be one person or two. Don't allow anybody to just come and then enter in there. Be very strict at this stage. And let me say you have very many poultry houses, and then you have, like, this is most especially with the broilers, you have a bird at 4 weeks, a bird at 3 weeks, a bird at 2 weeks. Don't put the chicks which you are brooding in the first gate, whereby when you come in, that's when you will find them. Put them at the end, whereby for you to reach there, there must be a reason for you to reach there. Because if they are just at the entrance of the gate, anybody can access those birds. And remember, the birds are weak. And if you are also visiting these houses, make sure that you start visiting the houses from the little ones, from the small ones. And once you have now visited from the small ones, you can now go to the older ones, because the immunity of these birds are very, very low. If you start visiting from the old ones, at some point maybe these birds are ill, but the immunity is, very, very high. They are fighting the disease. That disease, if you carry it and then bring it to your birds, the little ones, they will automatically die. They will die. So make sure that you also follow that one very well. That way, your birds will grow very, very perfectly. Another thing is that make sure that you do vaccinate your birds. Vaccinate your birds according to the vaccination schedule given from the hatchery. Don't skip, because the moment you skip a vaccine, you're actually doing a very huge mistake. Vaccinate them, and then if by chance a disease breaks out, the birds will be having that immunity that can fight that kind of disease. So that's another thing which you can do to actually prevent your birds from dying, during the brooding stage. Another thing is that keep drinkers and then feeders very clean. Very clean. Make sure that you wash them every day in the morning before giving feeds and then water to the birds, especially the water. Make sure that the drinkers are clean every day. The moment you give dirty water to your birds or drinkers which are very dusty to your birds, that is a problem. And then still on the drinkers, make sure that the drinkers are sufficient, they are enough for the birds, make it very easy for the birds to access the feeders and the drinkers. Don't make them, very little in the house. Make them as many as possible for the birds to, have access to them anytime they need the feeds or the water. Another thing is that make sure that you inspect the behavior of your birds. Try to move around in your house every day, every time. Look at the behaviors of the birds. With poultry diseases, a poultry disease starts from a bird and then goes to another one. So by you actually monitoring your birds every day, you will actually be, working very hard. And if you find a bird which you actually don't understand it very well, isolate the bird and then start giving it enough treatment. That way it can prevent a disease, if it's having a disease, from spreading to other poultry birds. So that's very important. And then still on top of that, make sure that you do have a vet which can come and then monitor your birds. But if these vets are coming, be very strict to them, because these are the people that, they really carry poultry diseases at a high percentage. These are the people that move to farms every day, different farms every day. So the moment you expose these vets to your poultry farm without giving them restrictions, they should follow the biosecurity measures on your poultry farm before entering your poultry house. Make them bathe. Make them wear the gumboots from your poultry farm. Poultry diseases are carried 80% by human beings. So the moment I am here today, let me say this morning I am here, in the afternoon I am at a poultry farm. And after 2 hours like that, I can actually take a disease from here to somebody's poultry farm. These people are actually experts, but they can also turn us upside down when we give them the chance to. Don't be shy. This is your investment. This is your money that you have put in. You cannot just sit there and then praise anything which is not good. Have a voice. That voice will help you grow your farm from a small one to a big one. And then the last one is that make sure that predators like snakes, rats, and then other small insects don't enter into your poultry house, because the moment they enter, they can go and then harm your birds. And if they harm your birds, you can also kill them. So make sure that your poultry house is okay. The place where you are brooding your birds is perfect. There is no any entrance like any hole. That way your birds will grow perfectly. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and like the video. Don't forget to turn on your bell notification. That way you will be notified immediately I drop any kind of video on the channel. So as usual, thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye bye.